But my next guest is one of the guys that I watch all the time. This is why I got Steve Guttenberg on, because I watch him all the time. People say to me, "What do you watch? You watch? What do you watch online? Porn?" I said, "No, I actually watch hi-fi porn." What do you mean? I said, "Well, there's all these influencers online. I actually like enjoy listening to them. They put me to sleep." They go, "What do you mean?" I said, "No, there's just they do reviews of high-end gear. I kind of love it." And one of them is this next guest, who has a store in Canada called Audio Excellence, and so I'd like to welcome Adrian Lowe as my guest on the show. Thank you, Adrian.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. It's funny that you say they put you to sleep because a lot of the comments I get is, Adrian, you have such a soft voice. You put me to sleep.
Well, you know what? You have this thing. You do know it, right? You've got this voice, right? And it's
Yeah.
like the other influencers are kind of funny. First of all, thank you for not having the first name of Jay, because there's a hell of a lot of J's on the goddamn audio
Yeah.
influence line,
Yeah.
okay? And you know
Yeah.
exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
them is that freaking is the Donald Trump of high-end audio down in Florida, who like everything is the biggest, the best, the heaviest, the most expensive. This is the stuff, guys. It's got to be. If it's not the biggest, the most expensive, it's not the best, and it's shit. That's that Jay, who I find mildly entertaining because he kind of looks like Vin Diesel and talks like a member of the Sopranos. Somehow he fucks up the English language in ways that I find so unique. I can't believe that English is his first language. I really can't, because it's almost like listening to a mob guy go, "It's copacetic how we decided to help the problem." That's how Jay's very entertaining. But you got to watch. You have to. Jay is the aspirational insanity of the high end, which we'll get into. And then you have Jay Aggie, I guess Aggie, who used to work for you, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes.
What is his problem? He never mentions you by name, and he
Oh, is
never
that right?
or by name. And yet, after you listen to him enough times, you kind of connect the damn dots. Why doesn't did you guys get along?
No, no, no. We get along really well. Jay, it's a really interesting story. Out of nowhere one day, I get an email saying, I have this YouTube channel and I want to start reviewing headphones, and I'm wondering if you would allow me to come to your store and listen to all these different headphones that you have, because I'd like to have this channel and expose more people to audio. And I thought, oh my God, this is great, because one of the things I've thought about for a very long time, and you will appreciate this, is that I felt that the audio industry has not done a great job of introducing young people to what you and I love. When you and I were younger, well, part of it is circumstance. When we were younger, the cool thing was to get a stereo system because you wanted to get a car, you wanted to be old enough to basically buy beer, and you wanted a stereo system because those three things got you laid. I mean, that's the truth. And
Why you didn't become a guitar player in a band, for crying out loud, man? This is the
well, and playing music, and so um, and stereo back then was still the new cool thing. Um, the younger generation listen to their music through headphones and their portable phones and devices like that, and so stereo is not the kind of experience that you and I had. So anyway, when I got this email, I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. Some young person wants to be a part of our industry. This is unbelievable. So I immediately emailed him back and I said, not only would we welcome you to come and check out all of our headphones, I'm going to introduce you to everybody I know locally so that they can get you to review a bunch of stuff. So that's how it started. And
encourage,
then
encourage.
absolutely, absolutely. And then about 3 to 4 months later, I sent him an email and I said, "Look, I'm looking for somebody part time to help out during the busy season. Do you know anybody?" He says, "What about me?" I said, "Great, come on in." And that's how he started. And at first, it was primarily to help us out with our computer stuff and our headphones and so on. And then um, I told the guys who were working here at the time, you should introduce him to some of the regular audio stuff, not just the headphones. And that was like opening a can of worms, because next thing you know, he's completely addicted. Because while headphones are great, there's something very tangible, something very visceral about listening to good audio. And that's how he got started and never looked back. And then after after COVID lifted, he wanted to go back to school to finish his master's degree, and so that's what happened. But we still see each other regularly. I see him at the shows. We contact each and talk to each other regularly. I'm very proud of the success that he's achieved in the audio world. For somebody of his age, he's done really, really well. I'm very, very proud of him. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
very passionate. He's very,
very.
very passionate. What he doesn't know technically, he knows viscerally and intellectually enough to be able to express it. I've read comments online when someone's like getting on his case because he didn't exactly do this and that. And I go, it's kind of like it's really weird people that comment, especially the high-end audio guys. When I was working at Lyric Hi-Fi, which is a thing we'll get into. But I noticed two things. I noticed there were guys who knew everything but could never afford anything. They just were time wasters, but they could just eat up your time, and they think they know enough to be dangerous and enough to eat up your time, and they have no intention of buying. And then there's the guys with a lot of money who really will just buy what you suggest and pretty much make it fairly easy. I never had to force a rich guy to buy. I really never did. I always thought, you know what, they've got the money, they have an idea. Just get an idea of the room they will have, and if they want to hear Hotel California, or whatever the track was that sold the system that month, that how that goes, right? The demo track. But these other people just drive you crazy. And online, of course, there's snarkies and all sorts of stuff. But in general, I find Jay's passion to be cool. I like the fact he's young, and he
Yeah.
does his best to explain what he.
100%, and a lot of his viewing audience are young as well, and that's necessary because if our industry is to continue, we need the young people. You and I, we hit a certain point where we're very happy with what we've got already, and we acknowledge that there may be things that we would want, but like you said to me on the phone the other day, I'm not going to start picking up these heavy things and having them exchange and stuff like that. And we're seeing a lot of our clients do the same thing. Not only that, we have clients who are downsizing because they're moving from their big house to a small condo, and they just don't have the space anymore. So we need the new blood. Yeah.
Were you the guy in high school that had the big stereo that everybody went over to their house and listened to? Were
No,
you?
so it started actually in university. When I was a kid, my father, he was a businessman. And it's funny because as a kid, every so often the teachers would say, okay, you need to tell this your class, what your parents do. And so when it came to my turn, I would ask my dad, what is it that you do? And my dad would say, I'm a businessman. Doing what? He says, well, whatever business I can do. And he would oftentimes go to different parts of Asia, like in Indonesia or Malaysia, and be out for months at a time, trying to do business and support the family. And then he'd come back and he would bring back these LPs and some weird music that we Singapore at the time, back in the 60s and early 70s, was still very much a third world country, so very poor, undeveloped. And so we lived in this village where our neighbors had, and ourselves as well, had houses with zinc roofs, right? And so very poor, open sewers, that kind of thing. But my father had a hi-fi system, which was insane. And it was a Marantz with JBL speakers and Thorn's turntable. We had
Wow,
nothing else, but we
that
had
was
that
like,
audio
that
system.
was that was high five.
Yeah, and he had records by from Deutsche Grammophon with von Karajan. He had music from Greece. It was just all kinds of stuff, very unusual. So anyway, that's what I remember about audio. And then we moved to Canada, and in university, I was bored to death. I loved music, so I realized there was a club, a music club, as they called it, where you could book the room for an hour and you go in and play records. And so I did that, and that started kindling this desire for me to own an audio system. And way back then, there was a magazine called Audio. I don't know if you remember. It was a thick annual compendium where it listed virtually every manufacturer and all their models and all their specs.
Yeah,
And I was going to,
their annual issue was something we
that's right,
always waited for. It was a
that's right,
because we had
exactly. It was the Bible.
stereo review, but audio was much more of a hipper. You believed it in audio. Sure, I
That's
remember.
exactly right. So I would go through every single page and tick off or mark off the items that had the best specs, because that's, back then Stereo Review and High Fidelity told you, right, that's what you should buy, the best specs. And so came down to speakers, either by Bose, because Stereo Review said Bose was the best speaker, or Show in Vegas. You may remember those, because they had the highest sensitivity with the lowest distortion, and so they
Big
could play
woofers, big woofers, right? A
big
lot of
woofers.
big, a
Yeah,
lot of
big
woofers,
orange
big,
woofers. Yeah,
big
big
things.
orange woofers. So I marked them all down, and that was my goal one day, to have these incredible things. And that's how I got started. And when I finally saved enough money, I would go through all the different stores and find the place that had the Bose 901s, and scrape enough money to buy them, took them home. At the time, I had bought a used Macintosh integrated amp, the MA5100, and hooked them all up. And I was so excited. And I, turned it on, listened. I thought, this sucks. This is horrible. There's something wrong. There's no dynamics. There's no high frequencies. Everything sounds mid-rangey and very, very dark, and
No,
like,
wait. In other words, it's got no highs, it's got no lows. It must be Bose. Isn't that right? Isn't that how the
100%.
cliche, isn't that how the cliche goes?
That's exactly it. I was so sad. I was so sad. I couldn't believe it. And I went back to the dealer, and of course the dealer said, "Well, that's the Bose. I mean, you wanted it, you got it," and couldn't do anything about it. And so I went through my depression, because I'd saved all this money, and this is what I got. So I started hopping from one store to another, going through the yellow pages. Back then, the stereo stores were listed under Stereophonic. So I would go through every store, and most stores were selling the same kind of stuff, right? And then one day I happened across this store at the time, down on Queen Street, and walked in, and the two guys that were there were really nice. They were hippies, long hair, very cool, looked like they meditated, very, very cool zen about them. And I told them my story, and they said, "You know what? Have a listen to this." And they brought me into this small room, tiny little speakers on a pair of stands, turntable. And I'm thinking, turntable? I mean, don't you know CDs are the thing now? And a small little integrated amplifier with heat sinks on the top. And he played me something. I can't remember what it was, and it was magical. I'm thinking, holy shit, what is this? And he says, "Oh, those are the LS35As by Rogers." I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't believe it. So I'm saying, what are the specs? And he says, specs. So they don't mean anything, the specs. And what's the amplifier? He says, it's 20 watt pure class A. What is it? A musical fidelity A1. I had no idea what all this means. What's a turntable? It's a Rega Planar 3. And make a long story short, eventually that's the system in bits and pieces I bought over time. And to this day, that system still makes magic. It is absolutely beautifully, very, very musically compelling. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how my
I
journey got
think
started.
guys like us, I was going to get up and walk away and come back to you and show me my Spender LS35As. I
Yes.
have I have a 35-year-old pair of Spender LS35As. I've gone through 8 billion things. I kept those mothers,
Yeah.
okay? Because they
Yeah.
were magical.
Yeah.
Because they gave you this, like we're going to get into this whole sound staging and imaging
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
because this is
Yeah.
jargon that didn't exist back when we all started.
No.
Like we
No.
know what it's about.
No. No.
But I hear you, the magic of what you're talking about. When I came home with my first real quote stereo, which was a Sony receiver and a pair of KLH6s and a Garage turntable, plugged in with lamp cord into the wall. That was one of the greatest days of my life. Like because I graduated from a Zenith compact all-in-one piece of garbage into something that resembled music, and all of a sudden, wow. But it just seemed that like everybody had stereos in those days. Like that was
Yeah.
everyone had a stereo. Now, like nobody, I'm not saying nobody. Of course, you have a business and have to run it, and I do. But to be honest, I have a lot of friends who are my age or a little younger. I'm 73. So I've got friends. My wife is 65. So a lot of her friends. So they're between the ages of 65 and 70. They all had kids. The kids are all gone. They're all extremely affluent. They all love to go to live shows. They love live car. They will fly to see Bruce in 4,000 countries. You go to their house and they just have a Sonos system and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And we were in a loft recently of a friend of my wife's. I walk into this beautiful, I don't know, $4 or $5 million loft downtown, He has 7,000 record albums curated in this beautiful shelf, 5,000 CDs curated in this beautiful shelf. And I walk in the living room expecting to see some stereo. And I go, "What's up? Why are you listening to music?" And he points to a Bluetooth speaker on his kitchen cabinet. And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, I just listen to Spotify." "You got all this?" He goes, "Yeah, I can't get rid of it. It means too much to me." I said, "Do you have a turntable?" He goes, "It's a 50-year-old Pioneer. It's in the drawer." And I have to tell you, Adrian, because we can talk about this all day long, like with the disconnect that happened here.
Yeah.
And yet, as crazy as that disconnect is, you go to Expona
Yeah.
and you go, "What?" Not only do you go, "What?" Because it's unbelievable. But here's the thing. When you went into a hi-fi show in the 60s and 70s, I remember going to the Statler Hilton in New York, right? So I'm 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. And you go to the hi-fi show and there's the Sansui room, there's the Onkyo room, there's the JBL room, there's the Tanberg room, right? There's the
Yeah.
Klipsch room, maybe, and the Mac room was like for the expensive stuff, right? And you walk around and you go, "Okay, how much is that? How much is that? How much is that?" And everything is like, anywhere from 500 to 1,500. And then maybe Mac would be like 2,000 and maybe Klipsch would be like 2,000. But the point is, you could reasonably assume that if you saved your money for a year or two, you could afford that high end stuff, right? You could reasonably assume that. Now you go to Expona, as you know, and
Yeah.
you walk into some of those rooms, and the prices are posted on the outside of the room, and it says, "This is what you're listening to. XVS is $357,000. Clear audio statement, $150,000. D'Agostino amplifiers, $300,000. DCS digital, blah, blah, blah. Cables by companies I don't even know who is making this cable. It's
Yeah.
basically Adrian and JJ's cable company is really what it is. $80,000. It says total price for gear, $1,300,000. And I'm
Yeah.
watching this stuff. And meanwhile, Expo is packed. It's packed. There's 10,000
Yeah.
people. But it's like going to a luxury boat show. So when I watch your show, this is what I love about your show. This is really, I want to get back to you. You have like a real world, yeah, you get crazy, but you have a real world economic platform with which to offer high quality gear. So back, if you look at $1,000 40 years ago, that's $8,000 today. You can get some amazing audio gear these days for like $8,000, which is like $1,000, 30 years ago. So the money isn't a stretch anymore. The technology is fabulous. How do we educate those people? Like you must do a lot of time, you must do a lot of work in trying to educate these people. Do you find yourself doing that?
Yeah, but it's still very difficult. I think stereo's heyday in terms of popularity was definitely during the 70s and 60s and a little bit into the 80s, because back then, again, it was the main media from which you got your music. Um, but once Walkmans became popular, and home theater became a thing, um, then the stereo system for the home became less and less and less important. And then, of course, the other thing is, as baby boomers, I'm right at the tail end of the baby boom generation. As we got older, we most of us became certainly more affluent, started having nicer places. I mean, I remember when my first place was a rental, paid $300 and didn't give a shit about furniture. It was whatever hand-me-downs were from the previous tenants. Happy to keep them, didn't even think about changing the covers. It was just, whatever it was. And all my records were in milk crates, and that was okay. My speakers back then were sitting on milk crates, and again, that was okay. If I tried to do the same thing today with any of my clients, they kick me out of the house because they've got nice homes and nice furniture. Um, so the 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 buyer today, in terms of our age bracket or younger, slightly younger, their expectations of products are going to be different. It has to fit into the decor. It cannot be too big. It has to look a certain way, and ideally, in many cases, disappear. And so a lot of custom work these days is how do you hide speakers, and that still sound pretty decent, and it's very difficult to do that. And then the younger generation, as I said earlier, oftentimes don't even know what a stereo system is. They're very happy with computer systems or earbuds and so on. So I don't know that it's necessarily possible to do a huge change as we would all like to see. But what's encouraging is I've noticed that there are companies, typically from Asia, coming out with inexpensive DACs, and in many cases even ladder resistor DACs, where they cost $400. The most recent Toronto show, I was walking on Sunday to visit the show before it got busy, and I visited a friend of mine, and he was showing me this new ladder DAC portable, but it's apparently quite decent, for 429 Canadian dollars. That's like $350 US, made by a company called FIO, and it's supposed to be very good. And so I have hope that the new blood will be able to consume good quality audio that doesn't cost a lot of money, and maybe get them to progress along along the dream, if you will, that you and I had when we were growing up. Maybe they'll never get to the point where stuff is as big as what you and I got, but they'll get better quality and for the money that they're spending. Or the alternative is that they can buy pre-owned equipment at a fraction of the cost that people buy when they spend new.
So, for example, I love when you do your let's talk about the high. If we look at the Japanese market in terms of the hierarchy. You've got Luxman, Accuphase, and Esoteric is like the top three Japanese electronics companies, right? And they're ultra luxury. So they feel great, they look great, they sound great, right?
Yeah.
And when you do your reviews, and then you have Mac, and Mac has, and everyone's got a sound. Everyone has to understand every manufacturer has a house sound, and as you and I know, because we've been in this business for a long time, we have expectations and understandings about certain house sounds that certain companies possess, and we kind of know and we kind of tailor it. When you compare, let's say, Mac tube gear these days to, let's say, the Accuphase, like the corresponding Accuphase that you may want to compare it to, how do you view? I know you're a big fan of Mac. You stood
I
by
like
it?
both. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you view tubes in general these days, and how people do they still want tubes? I mean, do they consider it a hassle? How do you sell that stuff?
Tubes are still a niche of the broader market. Um, there will always be a certain group of people who like the slightly warmer sound of tubes, the slightly more forgiving character of tubes. And I'm generalizing here, of course, because there will be some tube products that don't sound like that. When you sold at Lyric, I think you sold Audio Research at the time.
Yeah, we did. We had audio research for the most part. It was what it was for the big boys. It was either
Yeah.
audio research or Levinson. Those are the two
Right.
psychologically, like, you picture
Yeah.
house sound between the
Right.
two of
So Audio Research, their house sound, if you will, for the most part, is that they try to make the sound as neutral as possible using tubes, as opposed to back then, the Conrad Johnson was the other brand,
other
which was
side.
more
We
golden,
we
more
sold
romantic,
Connie J
sweeter.
and the same
Yes,
thing. It was this
yes,
golden
yes,
hue
yes,
of like warmth and stuff.
exactly. Cadillac versus a Ferrari kind of thing, um, and so there's definitely that, right? But in general, tubes do have a sweeter, softer, more forgiving, more romantic character. They don't have the kind of speed, attack, dynamics of, say, a Spectral that you and I will remember. But then again, if you're listening to a recording that is not great in terms of recording quality wise, maybe a bit harsh, and I've noticed, especially with myself, but certainly a lot of my clients, as we get older, our ability to listen to high frequency harshness, our patience for it, diminishes dramatically. I've become my father. Turn it down.
Right.
Um,
There's a stridency to it, isn't there?
yes,
for
Right.
lack of a better way to describe it.
Didn't notice that back 30 years ago, but suddenly it's like, oh, that sounds bright. The tubes can allow you to enjoy that same music, whereas maybe without the tubes, you might not enjoy it as much. So there's still definitely a cohort of buyers who prefer the tubes. Macintosh in general is a bit warmer. It's a bit more romantic sounding compared to, say, a purely neutral sounding solid state brand, and that's why a lot of people still buy Macintosh. And of course, it's a throwback. If you look at the look, the aesthetics, it's a great reminder of how things used to be. You've got the meters, you've got that color, the green and the blue and the black. It's a lot of people like that, and it hasn't really changed for 50, 60, 70 years. Um, AccuPhase also has a lot of those kinds of characteristics. It's a little bit warmer, but it's more dynamic than a Macintosh. The mid range is definitely more propulsive. When you listen to an AccuPhase, it boogies. The mid range is very propulsive. You listen to the voice and it makes you want to dance. Um, the bass is definitely tighter. Not quite as romantic, not quite as warm sounding as a Macintosh. Soundstage on a Macintosh is generally wider, more enveloping, but AccuPhase is more precise and the imaging is sharper. So it's two sides of the same coin. It's a lot of similarities, but also enough differences that one person will prefer one versus the other. And we're lucky in Canada. AccuPhase is cheaper in Canada than in the US for some reason. So, generally speaking, Canadian products in Canada will cost more than in the US. Our exchange rate is not favorable. We don't buy as much because our population is smaller. So, generally speaking, that's the case. But for whatever reason, AccuPhase in Canada is cheaper, and so we do quite well with AccuPhase relative to, on a per capita basis, what US does with AccuPhase. Yeah,
So you're talking like on a dollar for dollar basis, someone's spending $7,000, $8,000 on an integrated.
yeah,
They'll choose Mac or they'll choose
yeah,
AccuFade.
yeah.
And it's like, so let me ask you this, as someone who sells it all the time, what speakers do you choose to play with which amplifier, if I may ask you? Like what is,
Oh, absolutely. So one of the common questions, because we have a YouTube channel, we get emails from all over the world asking for advice and help, and one of the most heartrending and most difficult things for me to answer is that I don't know, because I don't know your taste. You in your email, which you've written beautifully and in many cases very comprehensively, I like jazz, I like rock, I like classical, etc. But the problem is I don't know really what you hear and what you like. See, with visual stuff, it's easy. When you and I both look at green, we know that's green. Maybe different shades of green, but we know it's green. But when I say it's it's got depth, some people think of depth as in bass depth, and other people think of depth as something else. The words have different meanings to different people, and so oftentimes the best way for me to start before the audition, say over the phone or by email, is to say, what speakers do you have now? And what do you like about them? What don't you like about them? What have you heard that you like? And they'll give me a frame of reference as to what speakers then to use to start the audition with. In different instances, once we've established a connection of listening, client comes in, we listen, and we keep the same things and just change one variable. And from changing that variable, I'll get a better idea as to what they're looking for. And in some cases, if it requires, we'll bring the stuff over to the client's house and let them hear with their system, because that is ultimately the best way, if possible, to audition something. It's not always possible, but that would be one way to do it.
do you find yourself educating people for the first time about this whole idea of imaging and sound staging? Because I didn't know those words. Like that wasn't part of the jargon until I started reading Absolute Sound.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So we all
absolutely. Yeah,
started reading Absolute Sound, and we started reading Jay Gordon Holt and Stereophile. And we started to understand this more elusive kind of, I don't know, say intellectual, but it's a lot more emotional way to listen, as opposed to like the THD is 0.001 and the crosstalk is 0.002 and all that shit that we used to live by in the early days, all of a sudden had to do with hearing it. I have to say that for all the systems that I own, until I bought a pair of Accustat 2+2s, which remember were 11 inches high.
How did you get them into your place? My
Well,
gosh.
the thing is, I had my first royalty check, right? And well, it's a little bit of a story, I'll tell you. I had my first royalty check. I think I told you this when you and I were talking on the phone, which, by the way, you were wonderful on the phone. And I thank you so much because we had such a great conversation. We're so in common about how we view things, especially because I did sales. So why not? So I was on tour and and I was gone for like a year or two and I'm making a lot of money. And so now I was armed with money and I walk into Lyric Hi-Fi to buy a soda turntable, which was
Oh,
Harry Pearson's favorite table. I'm going to
yes.
buy a soda and whatever else I'm going to buy. I don't know what else, but I'm going to buy. And I come into Lyric and I walk in and I go, hey, you saw, and I'd never been in Lyric before. It was very intimidating. And I went, I'd like to listen to soda. They go, okay. I brought my own record. And they go, what record? I said, what difference does it make? And I said, well, I wanted this record. And I go, Silk Degrees by Boz Scaggs. And the guy goes, I don't like that record. I'm not going to play it. And I went,
Oh, no.
what? Now, this was Elliot, Elliot Goldman from, he owes Suncoast or whatever down. We've since had conversations about this because he doesn't conveniently remember who he was talking to or how he treated me back in those days.
Yeah.
We since met at Exponas, and it's been very funny in the conversations. He says, "Did I actually say it to you?" I said, "Yeah. You said you weren't going to play the records. You didn't like it." And I said, "What'd you do?" I said, "Fuck you." I walked out, and I went down to Soundbite Singer, which it could have been the same at Soundbite Singer because Andy Singer wasn't exactly Mother Teresa either. But he wasn't there that day. Bob Herman was there. Do you know Bob Herman? But okay, he's been in the
I
business
know
for
Andy Singer, yeah, but I don't
he's
know
been
Bobby.
around for a million years. He's at Stereo Exchange now. He's veteran, and Bob was really nice to me. And I walked in and I went, "Yeah, I just left Lyric Hi-Fi and they wouldn't play my record." He starts laughing at me. He goes, "What asshole threw you out there?" I went, "Oh God." So next thing you know, I buy a pair of Accustat 2+2s, and he sells me a PS Audio 200C amplifier, and I bought a Audio Research S. No, no, but I bought a PS Audio 4.6 or something like that. So I bring it home, and I had a table. I don't know why I have this table. A Jean-Francois Latelec baby stud table. It's made in France or some shit. I don't know. Anyway, I put them up. I had 9-foot ceilings. I put these speakers up, which were gigantic freaking
Yeah.
speakers. My wife walked in and went, "What the hell?" I mean, talk about not inconspicuous.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And but it sounded pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I started noticing center fill and expansion beyond the scene and depth.
Yeah.
And I started to understand that. So my question to you is when did the idea of imaging and sound staging come into your awareness on audio?
Yeah. So I told you about the Bose 901s, and I was, I would say, um, kind of, but not quite with the LS-35As, the Rogers, because at the time I was so impressed with how musical it sounded. I didn't cotton on to the imaging and sound staging. All I knew was that there were no speakers. I didn't understand the concepts. I heard what I heard, but I didn't know how to describe what I heard. All I knew was it was a sound that emanated from the front, completely away and detached from the speakers. There was a sensation of being there at the event because it just disappeared. Um,
This, by the way,
and then,
listen, was this vinyl at this
yes,
point?
he was
It was
playing
vinyl.
the Rega. He was playing the Rega Planar 3, the P3, the original one.
Okay.
And then he started telling me, the salesperson, I think his name was Bob, he started telling me that there were underground magazines that you could buy because, he said, no, don't read Stereo Review and High Fidelity. You need to find magazines like Absolute Sound and Stereophile. So I went to the stores and they didn't have them until I found a big store. And then they had these magazines and they were quite expensive. So I bought them. But then, of course, back then, reading an Absolute Sound was addictive. The writers virtually all of them had this ability to paint pictures with their words and describe in three-dimensional detail what they heard, and in such a way that they were telling a story that you couldn't wait for the next issue, right? And the problem was they
You
were
are
so
so right. Cover to cover, over
absolutely,
and over, over and over.
absolutely
No advertising, cover
no.
to cover, man.
Yeah, and the problem was they were so published so infrequently that you would kill yourself waiting for the next issue, and then when the next issue came, I mean, you would read it again, cover to cover, multiple times, um, and uh, um, and that's when I started to understand that there was this concept called soundstage and imaging. Harry Pearson talked about how in Seacliff, Room 3, he had these big, huge Infinity IRS fives that basically dwarfed his room. And but once you turn something on with the Jadi amplifier, if you remember those, the walls disappeared, and then what you had was this magnificent orchestra playing in his room. And of course, now I said to myself, I got to hear these speakers. I can't afford the IRSs, but maybe one day I could afford the RS1Bs because those were the affordable speaker below it. And at the time,
Or maybe even Maggie's at the time. Did you
yes,
ever think
yes.
about
Well,
Maggie's?
again, so I was starting to read the magazines, and but
Right.
it seemed like all the senior editors, Anthony Kordsman, Sid, what was Sid Smith, was it? They were all talking about the RS1Bs. It seemed like they all had a pair, and so I checked around all through Toronto, and nobody had the pair of RS1Bs because they were like $15,000.
What year was this around? Give me an
Uh,
idea.
80, 86, 87.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so then I found a store east side of Toronto, and walked in, and he said, "Well, we don't have the RS1Bs, but we have these speakers." And I looked at them and I said, "They're not speakers. They look like transparent screens." And he says, "Oh, those are Martin Logan's and CLS's." So I said, "Can I hear them?" He says, "Sure." He plays it for me. He's playing Weavers at Carnegie Hall. The
My
concert,
by the way, may I say my
yeah.
first concert? My first
I
concert.
read about that. It blew my
Yeah,
mind
actually
because
my
that sound blew my mind. I'd never heard anything like this before. So then he starts describing this concept of soundstage and imaging, and that's when I understood this.
you
So the
could see them on stage now, couldn't you?
100%,
You'd go,
100%.
there's Lee Hayes, there's Ronnie Gilbert, there's Pete Seeger, there's Fred Hellerman. You could I can't believe I remember this shit, but you could actually pick them, and not only that, you could hear them stamping on the stage of Carnegie
That's right,
Hall.
100%. So he played Rambling Boy, right? And Pete Seeger is strumming the guitar. And for the first time in my life, I thought, oh my God, this is transcendental. I understand the magic of what they're talking about these magazines now. It's not just a concept. I understand it. I've experienced it. It's like being, I don't know, at a Pentecostal church and having the Holy Spirit invade you. That's how I felt. And ever since that time, I've been on the path trying to, reproduce that magical event. And the interesting thing is, of course, I think for many of us, it's the same kind of thing. We're always trying to find that nirvana, where a great recording meets a great system, meets a great day of mind, so that you are ready to enjoy it, and in a nice acoustic, and then suddenly it's magical. Everything just locks in, and then there's that event. Yeah.
You know, God, so in that endless quest,
Yes.
the 200C amplifier blew up because it
I laugh because I had the same thing.
had a spark, and when that blue
Yeah.
spark, and they even warned you in the box, don't freak out when you turn it on because you'll see a blue spark. And one day I hit the blue spark, and the whole thing blew up.
Yeah.
So I mailed it back to PS Audio and became friends with Paul McGowan.
Oh yeah.
So that was 1988.
Yeah.
And then my wife goes like, those speakers are fucking ridiculous. So I said, okay. So I got rid of them and I bought a pair of Apogee Duettas instead, which were very difficult to drive because I think
Yes.
they were down to 2 ohms or some shit like this, right? I remember
Yeah.
the scintillas were 1 ohm. Like you needed like
One.
8 billion watts to push the
Yeah.
scintillas. So
Yeah.
then I get divorced and all of it goes down the tubes. And I bought a pair of LS3 5As to come back after the divorce because I needed to start somewhere. And I was at
Um,
a place called Audio Breakthroughs and who sold me the duettas. And I said, guys, I just got divorced. I got no money. And they went, you should get LS3 5As. They're cheap. They were like $400 or $500 a pair. And I still have them because I love them.
they're
Great.
one of
And
the
then
one of the classic speakers.
I slowly started to rebuild. And then I went to more gear. I went through just tons and tons of shit. What eventually happened for me, a couple things. Reading Harry Pearson month after month after month after month, I started to get this weird sense that he would start out saying the product is the greatest thing that God created. The next issue, it was a little less as great as God created. The next issue, there was a flaw about it that he wasn't crazy about. The next issue, he was starting to really doubt whether he was the greatest thing. And by the next issue, it was gone from his listening room, right? And I started noticing this trend of like the greatest. Did you know? Am I crazy, or did you notice similar kind of a
He
trend?
definitely, yeah, he definitely got excited about new toys, and then over time he would find newer toys. Um, uh, that didn't bother me so much because he was such a wordsmith. He was so good at writing. It was like watching episodes of your favorite series. You were hanging on to the next, the end of that episode, waiting for, like for example that the he promised an article where he would do a shootout of all the big amps, which never came, right? And but you kept waiting, thinking, okay, anytime now it's gonna come, and is he gonna like the audio research or the CJ or the audio, the Jadi or whatever was latest in his room, and it just never came. But yeah, you're not wrong. He did write that way. Yeah, yeah.
It
But
tended
the
to
interesting
grow.
thing is that the mainstay was always his
The IRS.
iOS.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So eventually, eventually the band, breaks up and I had been a client. I made up with Lyric years later and I became a client of Lyric. I'm hanging out one day and Lenny goes to me, what are you doing these days? Like you on tour or not? Because like you're hanging out, like you're doing, like you just hang out at the store all day long. And he goes, you want to work here? And I went, yeah, sure. And he goes, I can't pay much. I said, I don't really care. I said, I just want to meet every manufacturer I could ever meet because then I'll buy at wholesale for the rest of my life. That became my mantra. So I start working there, and then I noticed this peculiarity. All the sales guys there, I thought would be like audio freaks, right? They never talked about audio. All they talked about was the restaurant they ate in the night before, the movie they saw on TV or the movie theater, their girlfriends they're dating, whatever, 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 the favorite rock band they went to see, whatever. And I said, why? And they said, because we deal with this all day long. We don't even listen to our stereo systems at home and I went, that makes sense. If you are test driving Maseratis all day long for somebody, you just want to go home and go to sleep. Like, the mystery of owning it disappears. So all of a sudden, I'm at Lyric, and now every toy that I ever wanted to mess with was there. They had the Goldman turntable that HP said was the greatest turntable in the world, the T5 arm, and they had Koetsus, and they had the IRSs. They had, Arnie Nudell and Mike K were best. Well, then I found out that's a whole other story. HP, Arnie, and Mike K. That was a mafia.
yeah.
That was a real
Did
high-end
you ever
mafia.
meet? Did you ever meet Mark Levinson?
He came in the store a couple of times, never spoke to Mark.
Mm.
No. By
I
the
should
time,
hook you up with him. I
yeah,
should hook you up.
by the
Yeah.
time I was at Lyric, Levinson had already gone through his, what was his next one? Was the cello? Was the cello
Cello.
one? And he
Yeah.
had his own store downtown, and he
Yes.
never came by. But
Yeah.
but like so we were selling all this crazy shit, and they started getting to high end cables, and this is 1995. So MIT comes in one day and they go, we have these new cables way beyond shotgun. I remember reading about shotgun cables,
Yeah.
HP, like shotgun, like that's the
Yeah.
cable.
Yeah.
They come in and they go, we have this new cable. and it's attached to like, it looks like an attaché case, like a Halliburton luggage with secret
Yeah.
circuitry in that shit, right?
Yeah.
And they send two guys in from MIT, and they swear to God they got lab coats on, and for 2 days they're lecturing us on the proprietary materials used in this cable and why this cable is like the best, right? So like I go, how much is it? They go, it's $12,000 a pair. Now remember, this is 1995. It's a lot of money in
Oh
1995.
yeah, still a lot of money.
A lot of money. So I'm thinking, wow, $12,000. Okay, okay, okay. And then about 6 months later, Mike K comes in. He goes, "We got more expensive cable. We got new. It's called NBS." I go, "What does it stand for?" He goes, "Nothing but sound." I said, "How much is it?" He goes, $22,000 for a 15-foot pair. I went, $22,000 for 50. Okay, okay, $22,000. So in walks Walter Fields, the guy who owns NBS. And he walks in the store, and I walk up to him and I go, "Hey, so we're selling your cable. Can I ask you a question?" He said, "What?" I said, "What do I tell people when they ask me why it costs 22,000 bucks?" And this is my favorite quote in the history of the music business. He goes, "Let me tell you something. Somebody asks you what's in my cable, you just tell them there's a lot of good shit in it." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "You tell them there's a lot of good shit in there." I said, "What kind of answer is that?" He goes, "Let me explain this to you. A guy walks in here and wants to buy IRS speakers for 50 or $100,000. John these amplifiers. You know what? They're not hooking it up with wire. They're buying it at Kmart. They're buying from Lyric Hi-Fi." He goes, "You buy a Rolls Royce. Do you buy your Spark Plus from Kmart? No, you buy it from a Rolls Royce dealer because it's the best. Just tell them it's the best. If they don't want to buy it, tell them buy MIT. It's the second best." I have to tell you, Adrian, it altered my entire sales spiel after that. Because the
Oh my
number one salesman at Lyric Hi-Fi knew nothing about hi-fi. You would walk in, he'd go, "Good, better, best." Like, how much money you got, right? And it's cynical. It is kind of cynical, but in those days in New York, high volume, high money, no time, got to turn over, get
yeah.
people to buy, and like my friend worked at a guitar store on 48th Street one day, and I remember him saying to me, I said, "Boy, you treat people like so brusquely here." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, when I was down south, I was in a guitar store and they offered me a Coca-Cola and they plugged me into an amplifier for 3 hours. He goes, "That owner of that store came up to see me sell here in 48th Street and said, 'How do you treat people like that?' And I say, 'Buddy, you see that square foot of linoleum you're standing on? That's $48 a month a foot. I don't have time to offer people a Coke. I got to get them the hell out of the store.'" I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I did the lyric thing for a while. And then of course, Adrian, I was given everything in the sun. And I just wallowed away in just owning all this gear, like, because I could take it home. And I noticed something about it when they lend it to you. If they lend it to you for like 6 months, instead of buying it, you're after 6 months, you're bored, so you give it back anyway. It's kind of like it's like owning it, but you can return it.
It's not the
You
same.
Not the same. So I started going through all that, and then eventually, Twister went back on the road. I said to myself, I rebuilt my apartment. And at this point in time, I had already burned through 50 different pairs of speakers. I was now up to Wilson's. I had Wilson, the first Sabrinas, right? I really liked them. I had Sabrinas. And this was like about 10, 12 years ago. The system was really nice. But then my wife asked me to reconfigure the entire house, and I lost my room, and I couldn't put the Sabrinas in anymore because I needed room.
Yeah.
Because as you know and I know, this is the
Yeah.
one thing that people really don't understand, and we want to talk about this, which is the room is the key. The
Yeah.
room truly is the key. If you get the right room and the right speakers, you can build a system around that can blow your mind, and it doesn't have to be expensive. But you
Right.
got to know the room and you got to know the speakers. So you put me in another room, which I'm in now. The room I'm talking to you in now is the room that I grew up in. This is the
Oh,
room that had the stereo system with the KLH speakers. Okay.
oh,
I am reliving my fucking youth. I'm in the
nice,
same room that I was in 60 years ago. Okay.
nice.
And it's a smaller room, and I can only stick truthfully. I put Magicos here because my friend Peter McKay from Magico, as you know, Peter's
Yes,
Canadian,
yes.
wonderful guy. He's a neighbor, lives down the
Sweet
street
guy.
from me.
Yeah,
Gave me a pair of Magicos that were wonderful, but too big for the room. And
yeah,
eventually, I wanted putting monitors in, mini monitors, because the room can't handle more than that. It just
yeah.
can't. So the room kind of makes sense now, and it's all fine. And I have to tell you, I'm at the pinnacle of what I consider what I ever want. Like beyond this, my hearing isn't good enough to know. Like, you know what I used to say at Lyric Hi-Fi, by the time you're rich enough to buy it, your ears aren't good enough to hear it, you know? Like, guys would come in, like 70-year-old guys, and they start talking about a 4 dB dip somewhere, and I go, you guys can't fucking hear a thing. Don't give me this shit. Your wife hears better than you. You probably listen to a baseball game at the volume at 10 because, you turn down the volume. I can't stand it anymore. But the quality of the gear is spectacular. And I think what got me to your show was the fact that you take such care in describing the nuances of all this gear. Like you really take the time to listen to this stuff. So how many different lines do you carry currently?
Um, so we started the business in 1991, my wife and I. If you recall, back then it was the Gulf War. It was a bad recession, both in the U.S. and Canada, and we decided, why not? Let's do it right then. And so we had no money. So um, long story short, we realized that um, we had to find a way to get people to come visit us. So we had to have competitive advantages, a reason for people to come visit. And so one of the thoughts I had was, how do I help a client objectively understand that the things that I suggest will be among the best choices that he can make? So, for example, back then, if you could afford it, the best TV that anybody would buy, in fact, the only TV that anybody wanted to buy was the Sony, right? Whether or not it was true, that was drilled into their head.
It's
Buy the
Trinitron.
Sony.
Everybody
That's
wanted the
right.
Trinitron.
Everybody wanted it. I mean, it was the Sony. And so I thought, well, let's use the Sony effect. So I started thinking, at $2,000, what would be the electronics? At 5,000, what would, and so I came up with a list of criteria that helped me to shortlist the products that I would myself buy, because I had no money. So I had to make sure that I would buy it. And if I were willing to buy it, then I could justify why I'm recommending it to you. So it became very Adrian centric, both for good and for bad. But at least I could justify it. And over time, that expanded a little bit more in the sense that I had to also realize that not everybody has similar tastes as I do, but I didn't want to deviate too much. So it was important that the criteria, the objective criteria, stayed the same. So, for example, in some respects, we're kind of like Apple. Apple is not usually the first company to introduce a new idea. Once the idea has been out for a while and a lot of the issues are sorted out, and Apple thinks that they can make it into a product that is theirs, they'll introduce it. So the iPhone is an example. And so oftentimes when a new idea comes out, a new product comes out, we don't jump right on it. We'll watch and see if the company stays in business, because that's important to us. It's one thing as a consumer that I buy one. If I don't like it, well, it's just one. But as a dealer, I'll be selling dozens of them. And if I make a mistake, I'm going to disappoint a lot of customers. And then if you do that enough times, customers don't come back. So we take that responsibility very, very seriously. Reliability is another one. So if you remember, there was a product way back called Audio Alchemy. It was meant for a very affordable first-time consumer, if you will. Their DACs were like $200, their transports were like $900, and so on. Very, very cool, very affordable products. Over time, however, certain things kept breaking down, and we immediately stopped selling it for that reason, because we knew that this wasn't going to get better. And so we want to make sure that objectively those kinds of criteria stay the same. But from a sonic standpoint, this may not be my personal sound, but it doesn't deviate so far that I would say, no, this sounds terrible. So as long as it's within certain ranges, we'll represent it. So as an example, Macintosh and AccuPhase. In this case, I like both very much. So I would very happily take them both home. But let's say one was different enough that I wouldn't take it home. But at the same time, it is still highly musical that I can see somebody really enjoying it. And so subjectively, it would still fit within the range that we would want to recommend. However, objectively, we can definitely say, well, Macintosh has been around for 75 years. They're not going anywhere. And their reliability is good and their service is great. Same with AccuFace. They've been around for 50 years. They're not going anywhere and their reliability is great and service is wonderful. And then, of course, the other thing was resale value. I wanted to make sure that if and when the time came, if a client had to sell it, or God forbid he passed away and the estate reached out to us, and these days that happens more and more frequently, that I would be able to do one loss solid for my customer. And that is to be able to sell that product quickly at a fair and reasonable price and give all that money back to their estate. Because the last thing the estate needs during that particular time is to deal with, oh my God, how do we get rid of dad's all products and so on and so forth. So a lot of our clients have told their families that, God forbid, in the event that this happens, contact Adrian, and he'll look after you, which we do. We make sure that we sell all these products at whatever the best price is for them, at no cost to them. The estate gets everything, and that's our last solid for that customer. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, if someone, do you break down so your choices are marquee names,
Yeah.
names that have legacy names, right? Which is important. Turntable wise, you sell turntables,
Yes.
you sell Regas.
Yeah. We don't sell radio, so we sell clear audio, which covers a big range. We sell Macintosh, which is the division, if you will. They have their products made for them by Clear Audio, but they have their own cosmetic changes to it.
Right, and that aesthetic, that Macintosh deal with the green platter.
Exactly. And then MoFi turntables and so on. So there's quite a few, and then Project, of course, as well.
And you do Project as well. So if the customer walks in any given week between CD, vinyl, and streaming, where's the percentage fall on what they buy?
Streaming is much, much, much bigger by factors, magnitudes. A large part of it is convenience. You have the ability to access millions, if not tens of millions of songs at any given time. And it's quite cheap. It's like 10, $20 of subscription. So a lot of people do streaming. I find that turntables still appeal to, for the most part, the older buyer, because they grew up with turntables and they still want to play their records. And there's also something quite comforting and zen-like and ritualistic playing a record. So recently we had a Toronto Hi-Fi show, and a client who had a bunch of records in storage finally had to get rid of them because he was paying all this money for storage and he wasn't going to ever play his records again, and asked me to do him a favor and sell his records for him. So we went to get all these records, and unfortunately over time they got moldy and so on. So I decided I'm going to clean all these records before we put them up for sale. And what's interesting is that after a while you start finding this groove, this relaxing ritual of taking the record out of the sleeve, and then subconsciously there's that dust that wafts into your nose, and you go, whether it's good or bad, you smell it. And then you clean the record. It's very relaxing. It's a ritual. It's very relaxing. Then you put it in brand new sleeves, and then you put it away. There's that very comforting ritual that sets you in the mood to play a record. And because of all of that, I started to pull my own records out and started to put them in segments, if you will, that I will play now because I miss playing those records. But for the longest time, it was streaming. Similarly with CDs, although not quite the same ritual. CDs don't have the same, I don't find the same kind of connection with CDs as I do with records. With a record, I remember you got especially the really nicely produced ones where the jackets are full of writing and you could see who played on the record and who was the producer. And then the band would write liner notes, and it was just wonderful. CDs, you can hardly read anything because it's too small. Yeah.
Do you sell vinyl in your store?
We used to. We don't anymore because they took up way too much space. And number two, invariably after a while, they just sit there and just unfortunately just never sold. So
unless you're just selling Abbey Road. Abbey Road sells apparently all the time. Like someone told me there's a printing planet that all they do is print Abbey Road albums. That's all they do. Because every year it's still the number one vinyl selling
100%.
record in the world. Now, look, I'm a record guy. You're a record guy. We come from that age. That's what we love. You're 100% right about the Zen-like feeling of putting a record on. Like there's a warmth to it. There's, I'm a watch guy, not insane watch guy, but I just think I like things that go around. I like the tech, like records don't need to exist and watches don't need to exist. Let's be honest. You don't need a watch and you don't need a freaking record player. But we own watches and we own record players. That means we enjoy the technology of watching little mechanical devices. People just don't kind of get what I'm about to say to you. But the only thing mechanical about audio is either playing a record and watching the needle go on the record and where the speaker is making noise. That's the only mechanical stuff. Everything else is all electronic. The only thing mechanical, the only thing that's actually moving really is the art of the record reproduction and the art of the speaker. Here's what I find interesting. I have a Lena and a clock, which is a really good streamer, DCS, really, really good. Sounds great, And I even have an Edison electric network switch, because I'm just a geek, and I saw something about it, and I said, "Yeah, what? It's like $100. What the hell, And I went and got a network switch. Whether or not it's improving the sound, I can't tell. Because my hearing is really. My wife will tell you I don't hear shit, so I can't tell you anymore. But
On purpose. What?
well, that's always the case. Why? I can't hear you. But I have a good. I have a Luxman DX07 player. It's a great player.
Nice.
It's my last CD player. It's really my last one. After this, if it goes, it goes. And I don't think it's going to go for quite a while. It's a really good one. S8 CDs, I think, sound great. I still think CDs sound a bit better than streaming. I think streaming is close, really close. But if I'm streaming and I go A-Bing with a good SACD, SACD still beats it.
You're right.
And then when I play the vinyl of that same record, I have friends over and they go, here's what they'll say. They went, wow, that sounds really cool. And I go, better, worse? They go, just different. Like, it's just a different kind of a thing. Well, you know as well as I do that vinyl sales have exploded. A statistic that I read somewhere is that 50% of the people who buy vinyl do not own a record player, which blows my mind. Yeah. And here's my thinking about that. My thinking is they want the feel of owning a record because there's nothing like owning a record and looking at the liner notes and the visceral feel of it. But if they want to hear the music, they'll just Spotify it. But they're holding the record. They not necessarily on a turntable. Well, because vinyl has made these big inroads, I know that in England, record turntables sell off the charts in England. And I know that in at least in New York, my friend sells a whole bunch of EPIs and a bunch of Regas and projects. Do you not know? Do you notice record player sales up, down, anywhere, or is it just kind of like moving slowly?
They're stable. They're stable. There was a time a couple 3 years ago where you could certainly see this strong resurgence. Now it's stable. I can't say that they are exploding like it was or resurging like it was, but it's stable. Streamers sell really well to all ages, from young to old. But I'm always so happy to see a client buy a turntable or something to do with records, because it tells me that it's still ongoing. There's still people who are really enjoying the simple, actually very complicated art of reproducing a good record. It's amazing that you think about dragging a rock across a valley of groove and converting that impulse into electricity that then becomes sound. It's insane, what Edison did. This is absolutely insane.
Yeah, I have an 1899 turntable record player which plays the cylinders, and I have a 1903, and the 1903 which is over on my side here. The volume controls the two wooden doors, that open it up. So like I could just imagine back like in 1903, Edmund, it's too loud, and the guy just closes the little wooden doors. So when people come over and they go, "Can I hear the system?" and I go, "Well, this is what vinyl used to be," and people thought that was state of the art. 1903, and then they listen to my system, which is a VPI direct drive, right?
No.
And I have to say, for a dying technology, an awful lot of energy continues to go into making it better. Don't you find that fascinating about the vinyl replay business?
But there's something very cool, very interesting about vinyl. Again, there's just simply picking up a record, especially if it's something that you bought. I forget all kinds of shit, but if I pick up a record, I remember where I bought it, which is insane. How do I remember where I bought that record? I've got thousands of records, but I remember where I bought it. I remember the certain feeling that I was thinking, should I buy this record? Shouldn't I buy this record? Especially if it's a band I don't know, I just, why not take a chance on it? I don't remember much about CDs. I've got tons of CDs. And then that feeling is completely lost with streaming. I mean, I stream music simply because I'm too lazy to go find that record, or as I start playing a certain song, my mind starts free association and go, oh, that sounds like, Al Jarreau. I want to play Al Jarreau next, right? And then Al Jarreau comes on and go, oh my God, he sounds like Luther. I got to play Luther. So next thing I go, I'm playing Luther Vandross, right? And he's playing Superstar. I go, oh my God, Superstar, and they'll lead me to James Ingram or whatever else. And the thing is, streaming allows me to do that seamlessly, very quickly, and doesn't break, stride. Records force me to stop and enjoy that record and go, oh, I remember this. And in a very weird way, even the little ticks and pops soothe me because it was always there, and it will always be there. It's just like a part of, do you remember do you know the TV series called Bosch on
Sure.
Netflix?
One of my all-time, all-time favorite. I've watched every one of them 8 times over. My
Yeah.
turn, my wife onto him. I had to watch him, and he's always playing that Mac. He's always playing what was it, Coltrane?
The Ohm Wall speakers, right?
Those which are never
Yeah.
wired incorrectly. Like
It's not wired up.
nothing is wired, right? He's got the Ohm. He's got the Ohm amps in the corner. He's
Yeah.
got that Mac, and what does he has? A Marantz turntable, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know what the turntable is, but it's the coolest thing, right? You see the thing, and it's like if you're a smoker and you see somebody smoke on TV, you go, oh shit, I need a cigarette, right? Or I need a cigar right now. And it's the same thing. I see him go over and he starts playing one of the jazz concerts and go, oh fuck, I got to go play my record now. It stirs this impulse, and yeah. Or do you remember 9.5 Weeks all those years ago, right? And there's a scene where they're in his condo, and if I remember correctly, it was either a Nakamichi system or something along those lines. I can't remember now, but the CD player comes out, and it's like, as an audiophile, you see these things, go, oh man, it's so cool. So yeah, I get triggered by these kinds of things, and in particular records, or when you watch Friends and there's a shot where you see the Martin Logan speakers in the apartment, you go, those are Logan's, that kind of thing.
So
Yeah.
before I let you go, and I've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate it. Your sidekicks, Philip, and what's the other gentleman's name?
So Philip left us about 3-4 years ago.
Okay.
Mike.
Wow, Philip,
And
3 or 4 years ago now.
yeah,
Still
3-4 years
seeing him all
ago.
the time.
Yeah. So Mike's with us. Mike is insane. He is like you. For many years, he was a professional musician. He's also a documentarist. He's done film. He's done all kinds of stuff. This guy is jack of all trades and master of almost everything. The guy plays bass. He also plays synth and all that. And then Lewis joined us a few years ago. He was a very successful banker, and then retired, bored to death, and we convinced him to come and help, and he does. And then we have Curtis. Curtis was a co-op student like Jay, and we found him through a mutual friend. And I convinced him to come join us, and he joins us now. Then he's decided to go back to school to do he wants to be a mechanic for airplanes and helicopters. So he comes in on Saturdays to help out and to stay involved. And that's our team for now. We're thinking maybe to add another co-op student in January. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
How important is it for these guys, for you, to have them as sounding boards on your
Oh,
gear?
it's amazing. Both in terms of sound as well as in terms of business. The guys look after the day-to-day operations. I'm busy with my own clients and my projects, so I don't get to see day-to-day clients as much. And so they're very important to me to give me an idea of what's going on with the business, but also what people are saying about the industry and so on. And then from a sonic standpoint, we try to do a video more regularly. These days, not as easy because everybody's so busy, but we try to do videos together. So let's say in about two weeks, we want to shoot a video on the new Wilson Sabrina V's. And trying to get everybody together is not easy, but we're going to try and do that not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday. And so we will shoot a video where everybody gets to hear the speaker, same system, and we won't share our notes until the day of the shoot. And then on the day of the shoot itself, we let it all hang out, good or bad, doesn't matter. Nobody censors them. They'll say whatever they want to say. And in fact, I encourage them, tell the truth, and do it in your own words, with your own experience. And so it's very important for me that they tell me, yeah, what's going on.
Well, you guys were really brutal when you discussed Bose's takeover of Mac. Oh
Yeah,
my, like I already knew what was going on because
yeah,
obviously my friends in the
yeah,
business called me because you never fucking gonna believe we just bought that. And they said Bose. I said, I'm not that surprised. I'm
yeah.
really not that surprised, but boy, that's gonna like rattle the cages. Have you noticed any difference at all since the takeover?
Yeah, so I just addressed that in my one of my last videos because some people have been asking me about it, and I decided to just go a little bit more in depth. When I first heard the news, I was not happy because I was really afraid that bad things were going to happen. Macintosh has been under different ownerships for many, many years since the 80s. Clarion was one of the companies that bought them, and then over the years, lots of different private equities have bought them. Turns out, right after the acquisition, I dug a bit deeper because I really didn't know very much about Bose. All I knew was that my first speaker from them wasn't very positive, and they make these supposedly very, very good noise cancellation headphones, and that's really all I knew. So I started digging a bit more into the company, and I was actually very surprised to find out. First of all, it's a very successful company. They have different divisions. They have a commercial division where they supply to churches, stadiums, PA systems. And then I realized, yes, I remember seeing Bose systems in different commercial applications. And then they also make these headsets for pro leagues. NFL has used them, NASA is using them, Defense Department uses them. And then, of course, higher end cars use Bose speakers and Bose car audio and so on. So they're actually a very successful company. So fingers crossed, we waited a few months and I realized that nothing really changed. So I started talking with my direct agent at Macintosh, and he says the good news is actually they've streamlined a lot of things. They've invested even more money into both Sonos Faber and Macintosh to help them run better. And all told, so far, it's been a net plus from his perspective. And so far, from my perspective, now, as I said, I don't know the inner workings. That I don't know. But in terms of the end result, when we order things, we tend to get them quicker now. So hopefully, overall, it will continue to be positive. I don't know, as I say, I don't know the inner workings. There may be different things. I know, of course, that anytime you have a company buying another, there will be people being let go, and things like that. That's common. A new management team will come in and they'll bring their own people. They don't need the existing people. That will happen. But in terms of the end result so far, I can't honestly say there's been anything negative that I've seen. Yeah.
When I was at Munich about 4 years ago,
Yeah.
uh, Munich is a head trip. I mean, Expo is big, but Munich's
Oh,
even nuts.
yeah.
And I'm walking around and I'm seeing they got D'Agostino's everywhere and monsters everywhere. But the room that was the most crowded was the Mac room. And you know what the funny thing about it? Nothing was plugged in. But more people were in that room. You know why? Because Mac looks the shit. That's why. If you are if you're in this business, in this world like we come from, there is something. You talk about the visceral sensation of warmth of playing vinyl. I own only one piece of Mac gear in my life. I own a C28 preamp.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I remember that glow. I remember that glass glow because I was like 19 or 20, and it was like I said, "Oh, I'm now a dentist or a lawyer," because they're the only guys that could afford that stuff, right? And so Mac has this. They have. I hope for Mac that they continue on because they do represent a certain thing about this world and this that we come from that's spectacular. Before I let you go, quick question: most expensive products you sell? Speakers. What's the most expensive speaker you sell?
I would say the Wilsons, the XVXs, and the Subsonics. We've got them on display.
Okay.
Um, Turntable, we have the Statement, the turntables,
You
the
do. You
full
have a
setup.
statement. It's
Yeah, I bought that a few years ago
$100.
because the first time I saw version one, I fell in love. And I said to myself subconsciously, one day I'll be able to afford this.
Okay.
And then I was at a Montreal show exhibiting, and the distributor opened one up. He was going to exhibit that version two, and it turned out to be the very first one that came off the line, version two. And I immediately went up to him and said, "Okay, I'll buy it. If you give me terms to buy it, 6 months, I'll give you 6 payments. I'll buy it." He says, "Okay, we'll talk after the show." I said, "No, no, I'm buying it." And he's a friend of mine, so we made the deal happen. And then electronics, it would be D'Agostino with Griffin. Both of them are in that same price range. And then for DAC, it would be the DCS. And in cables, Shunyata and
You
Lumos.
have the Varese, the
Yeah,
crazy.
no, not yet. So Emran was going to come with the Varese, and then we were going to see if we could afford it. But it looks like we're going to wait till early New Year, and then we'll figure out a way to buy it. But yes, at some point we'll have one. Yeah,
Did
we
you
have them for.
have the Griffin Power? What is it? The Power Wave? I forgot the name
Yeah,
of
we
it.
have the. You mean the DAC, or
No, no,
which one?
no. The electronic, the box, the
The
AC or
power
something.
conditioner? No, not
Yeah,
yet.
I,
Yeah,
I,
we
re-
have the.
I reviewed it.
Is that
So the
right?
tracking angle, yeah, I reviewed it because my friend, do you know Anthony Chiarella by any
Of
chance?
course, great
Yeah,
guy.
Anthony's an old friend. So Anthony came over to my house and he left it with me for 3 months. And I heard it at an Exponent show and I could not believe what I heard. I said, that can't be real. That just changed everything. And
Yeah,
he lent it to me and I wrote an incredible review of it. It's
I'll
actually
check
the
it
most,
out.
and I interviewed the guy, Hafner, whatever his name was, that
Yeah,
developed that
yeah,
crazy cell shit. And this is the part of the high-end audio world that this is the crazy, the loony side of it that people just don't understand. You have to have a system that is so highly resolving that you can tell. If you don't have a system highly resolving, you'll never know the difference. But
yeah.
that unit but you don't have that piece. Have you never
No, I'm going
experienced?
to check it out. So we have 4 audition rooms. Uh, our 2 big rooms. We have Shunyata as our power conditioner, and then the other 2 rooms we have Taurus, which is a Canadian company, and what's the Anna McIntosh. But now that you mention it, in our big listening room, we have 2 systems on opposite sides. So I could certainly add the Griffin to that room. Come to think of it, that makes sense because on the other side is Griffin. So yeah, thanks for
So
letting me know. I'll add
you
it.
have the Diablo on display?
We have the Diablo 333.
Yeah,
We have
yeah.
the Apex amplifiers and the Commander preamps and the Essence amplifier. And we just placed an order a couple of months ago for the new, was it Revolution Mephisto, I think it's called. Whatever the new amplifier is, my mind just went. But yeah, it's apparently going to start shipping in February, March. So we'll get that as well.
Yeah, when I
Yeah.
walked into Exponent and saw the Apex amp, I said to Anthony, that's called the I'm not married amplifier because it's 4 feet long, three
It's
feet,
crazy.
2 feet high, and 400 freaking pounds. And it's insane. Well, you
It
guys,
is.
listen, I told you that I intend to come and visit, and I do intend to come up and visit. I'd love to visit the store.
Anytime.
Um,
Anytime.
I,
Anytime.
yeah, do you have any twisted question to ask me? I've been asking all these questions. You have a question?
Well, I'd love to, as I say, at some point interview you for that because, as I said the last time that we spoke, I was introduced to your brand by my late brother, my younger brother, because he used to come back. He was the cool kid, right? Somehow he always found the most interesting new things, the latest trends, and so on. And back in Singapore, it was a very closed and protected society. So like cool music, weird shit would be like the Eagles, right? And that would be as provocative as you would expect, because otherwise you would listen to the Carpenters, and nothing wrong with that. It's just that that's what you heard on the airwaves. That's what they played. And the odd time it would be the Beatles, but again, it wouldn't be anything of the late Beatles. It would be the early "I Want to Hold Your Hand" kind of music, right? Or Paul McCartney's, beautiful love songs. It wouldn't be the acid lace kind of music. Then he showed up one day, with this thing, and he started playing, and I'm going, what the hell is this? And at first I was like, ugh. And then after he played it a couple of times, I'm going, this is really interesting. I've never heard grooves like that. And we studied music, so it's like there's a lot of very interesting chord progressions, and it doesn't sound anything like the Eagles. It was like, and then of course moved to Canada, and then saw MTV and going, that's Twisted Sister. Who the hell knew? And completely changed my world perspective, if you will, and then started to realize it was okay to enjoy this. It didn't have to be a guilty pleasure. If you enjoy it, there's something that's pulling at your heartstrings. And then much later, my brother, who again knew so much about you guys, was saying, do you realize that that lead singer isn't the founder? Usually the lead singer is the founder or one of the founders. So no, it's the guitarist. They're going, guitarist, because it's like you wouldn't expect it. And then for you to reach out and going, oh my God, brings back all these memories of my brother. So it's very cool. You did a solid for me when you reached out, because all these wonderful memories of him came back. And I have to thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the show, Adrian. I really, really appreciate it. I
Absolute
wish
pleasure.
wish you give so Audio Excellence is the name of the place. Give me the address and the
Yeah,
web.
we're in Ontario, so it's 70 Esna Park Drive, Unit 7 in Markham, Ontario. You can find us audioexcellence.ca, or if you want to just check out our YouTube channel, it's just Audio Excellence Canada, and we look forward to getting your emails and telling us how you hate our unboxing videos.
Thanks everybody for listening to the JJ French Connection. I'd like to thank my guest Adrian Lowe from Audio Excellence. And if you notice more recently that I have high-end audio guys on, it's because this is a hobby that I love. I got into it at the same time I got into playing guitar at the age of 15. It has not left me. It's evolved the same crazy way. Steve Guttenberg, who has the Audiophiliac YouTube channel, is on currently. I have the guys from Grim Audio. They're going to be on in a couple of weeks because I happen to really like their stuff. This is all stuff I have a passion for, and I love having stuff that I have a passion for. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Take care.